Welcome! Today we are going to look again at the MakerBeam product by doing a teardown of one of my computers that has reached the end of its working life. MakerBeam comes in several pre-cut lengths, and I tend where possible to assemble the frame of my computers by utilising these standard lengths and cutting down the beams only where necessary. Here we can see the frame of this computer with one side of the case removed, allowing us to clearly see the internal parts. The sides of this case are formed from sheets of flexible, perforated polypropylene, spray painted with black plastidip, which is also flexible. These are purchased as large sheets and can be cut to size with shears and cable snips into any shape required. For this first build, I basically bolted the polypropylene sheets to the MakerBeam frame using small M3 nuts and bolts. I mounted a Mod My Toys vandal-proof power switch through one of these sheets on the front of the case. The intention in constructing the computer case out of MakerBeam units was to allow as much of the computer to be reused in future builds as possible. As we watch the teardown of this, you can see how the polypropylene sheets are actually bolted to the main frame. And the frames themselves are actually held together in the corners by small corner cubes. Each corner cube, once removed, allows you to see the MakerBeam, which can now be reused in a future case. Even the rubber feet on the base of the case can be reused by pulling them off and applying some double-sided sticky tape for the next build. Of course, naturally the hard disk itself, while only being a 500GB drive, is still reusable. You can see just underneath it the Pico power supply, which although a low-powered power supply, can still be used with a simple single-board computer. The Nocta fan on the back of the case is a standard 12-volt fan and of course can be reused in any future build. As I discovered for future builds, the polypropylene sheets can quite happily slot into the groove cut into the MakerBeam slots, and I experimented with this in the base of the unit. The polypropylene sheet you see here is not actually bolted into anything, it's just merely sitting in the groove on the MakerBeam slots. Polypropylene isn't necessarily the only material you can actually use for these sheets. While it comes pre-perforated for you, you can use alternative materials. I briefly experimented with using aluminium sheet with the same type of perforations and spray painting it with plastidip. This, however, does take a great deal more work for actually cutting out. But once it's spray painted with the black plastidip, it does look very professional. Here we see the Mod My Toys power switch coming out of the unit. These are very hard to get hold of these days, and I'll be keeping this for a future build. We can now dismantle the hard disk assembly, taking off the little brackets that held it to the MakerBeam. Once these are off, we can then go ahead and remove the Pico power supply. Again, a very small, very compact, low power supply that will be used in a future build. Then we can start removing the other sides of the polypropylene sheet, which quite easily pull off. And then removing the corner cubes allows us to take the bottom part of the frame off as well. As you will see, there are many different types of brackets that come with the MakerBeam system, allowing you almost infinite capability for actually setting up your frames. And now we can start to remove the clamps that hold the motherboard down to the frame. Once this is removed, we can pull the motherboard out of the system altogether. And that just leaves us with the parts of the frame, which we'll now finish off dismantling. Of course, naturally all the brackets, all the nuts and bolts can be reused in future projects, since they don't rust and they generally don't wear out. The polypropylene is of course almost indestructible, and I'm sure I can reuse parts of it in later builds. So while not all of the machine is entirely recyclable, a lot of it is. And this particular method of assembling cases has made it much easier to get the flexibility that I wanted when designing cases. So with a few simple tools, you can build a case for your computer of any shape and size you can imagine. And there we have it. The computer is now completely disassembled. Well, thank you for joining us today for this little teardown of one of the first computers I've built with MakerBeam. I hope you enjoyed it. That's it for today. Thank you for watching.